Is the crowd or everybody's upstairs or outside?
Some trickling down from upstairs, I think.
Yes, I think we'll start because the clock just keeps moving. But that's what happens. Okay. So first of all, happy Chodesh and Vijantiv. Today is a very special day besides being Rosh Chodesh. Chodesh Kislev is a historic day in Lubavitch. So I want to give first a general introduction, and then we'll talk specifically about his days. And at this time, we'll try to answer questions. One of the things which we don't have in our curriculum, we should have, is more about the history of Chabad, history of the Rabbeim, the Alter Rebbe, the Mitzvah Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, and there's a lot available. There's books that were written. There's books that were written by a Rabbi Avtzin. Years ago, I made recordings on this subject about the main point of this Alter Rebbe, Mitzvah Rebbe, Tzemach Tzedek, Rebbe Marash, up until the Rebbe Rashab, including the Rebbe Rashab. But at least now, for today, we'll go over a little bit of the history. This month, the Rebbe refers to this month as the Siddish month and Chodesh HaGeula. Top of the page, it says the Hasidic month of Kislev and the month of Geula. And the reason for this is because there's a lot of history of Chassidus and the development of Chassidus that took place specifically all in the same month of Kislev. And it's called the month of Geula because it's a month that also has a history of Geula, of different situations that happen, miracles regarding redemption. Of course, the first one is Hanukkah. Hanukkah was a time when the Jews were in exile by the Antiochus of Yavan, the Greeks, and to the point that we no longer had the Beis Hamikdash, it was taken away from us. And then Hashem performed the big miracle. So Hanukkah and Purim, these are 2 days which are also miraculous, but not just miraculous, they're considered days of redemption. Purim is a redemption from the Persians, and Hanukkah is redemption from the Greeks. But here we're going to go more into the history of the Hasidic Yom Tovim. Some of them are Geula, redemption, some of them are just more general. I can do this either chronologically, but I'm going to go by the order of the month, not when things happened. And if you have I made a spot there for notes so you can write down what happened when. Okay, so Rosh Chodesh Kislev we're going to elaborate on that. That's what the whole Farbrengen is about, to elaborate on what happened in Rosh Chodesh Kislev. But in one word, the Rebbe suffered a massive heart attack, 1977. It happened right in the middle of Hakavos, right in front of all the Chassidim. And miraculously, the Rebbe recovered. And we'll talk about those details. Just to give you one word about how great the miracle was, the doctor who was the cardiologist at that time, he said, I never in my entire career saw such a damaged heart in such a living person. So I think that says it all, what kind of miracle it was. Okay, the second day of Kislev is this is connected to a story that we have to wait a little bit, another few weeks, about another month rather, we will talk about that story. But there was a situation where the Rebbe's library, an extensive library of Sfarim, not just a library, it was something which is handed down from Rebbe to Rebbe to Rebbe until our Rebbe. And there was an attempt of someone, actually a family person, to take it all away. And there was a lot going on. And again, miraculously, it went to federal court, and they ruled and judged that the Sfarim belonged to the Rebbe. The actual day that we celebrate that is not Kislev, it's Hey Teves. But after the ruling, there was an appeal. So there were 400 Svarim that were recovered. They were held in escrow until the case would be over. And on the second day of Kislev, that's when all the Svarim actually physically returned. But we'll have to wait for next month to talk more about what was the significance of that. The 9th of Kislev. The 9th of Kislev, there are two dates there. One is 1773 and one is 1827. Both related to the second Rebbe of Chabad, the Mittel Rebbe. The Mittel Rebbe was born on the 9th of Kislev in the year 1773. And the Mittel Rebbe's passing was also on the 9th of Kislev, 1827. And that's also very significant because the Gemara says that we find specifically by great tzaddikim that their day of passing and their day of birth is the same day. And it means, what is the implication? Just like their life was a perfect circle, perfect cycle, started and ended the same day, is because their life itself was a perfect life spiritually. So we find this with the Mittel Rebbe. The 10th of Kislev is a day of Geula. The Mittel Rebbe was arrested by the Russian government. And in those days, the arrests were not just simple, they were very serious accusations, as if he wants to make some sort of revolution against the Tsar, which of course is a very serious accusation. Miraculously, his life was saved. But the day he went out of jail was the 10th of Kislev. What year was that? So you have the year, it was in 1826, exactly 1 year before his passing. The 14th of Kislev is the wedding date of the Rebbe and the Rebbetzin. This was in 1928, where that's, as the Rebbe once said, that this day is the day that made and created the bond between me and Hasidim and the Hasidim and me, which means everything is also, of course, from Hashem, but in the natural reason, what led to it that the Rebbe became our Rebbe was because he was the son-in-law of the previous Rebbe. And the leadership of a tzaddik, or any leader, goes over to their son or son-in-law or another relative. Previous Rebbe had no sons, so he went over to the Rebbe. So this day of the marriage, besides it being a personal day of simcha for the Rebbe himself and the Rebbetzin, this is also the day that led to the Rebbe's leadership in our generation. Then we have the 19th of Kislev in 1772. What was that? That's the day that the Maggid of Mezrich passed away. That's not the day of redemption for the Alter Rebbe. That's a little bit later. This is 1772. The second leader of Chassidus, which is the Maggid of Mezrich, he was the successor of the Baal Shem Tov. He passed away on the 19th of Kislev. And on that day, he took the Alter Rebbe's hand and he said to him, this day is our Yom Tov. Even though it's a day of passing, why would he refer to it as a Yom Tov? Because Chassidus explains that what it means for the soul and what it means for the world, even though on one level it's the biggest tragedy that can be, on another level it's an amazing positive thing that happens to the world. We'll get to that some other time also. Right now we're just talking about the history part. Naturally, if this is the day that the Maggid of Mezrich passed, so it's also the day that the Alter Rebbe became the next Rebbe, took over the leadership from the Maggid of Mezrich. Number 8, the 20th of Kislev, 1796. That's when the Tanya was printed for the first time, which means up until that day, there was Tanya in written form. What? You look puzzled. That was 2 years later. But Chav Kislev, the 20th of Kislev, that was the day Tanya was printed, was finally finished. And that's also connected to a long story, but the general point is that there's tremendous opposition against Hasidus. And one of the things that was done, underhanded, was that people took the written copies of Tanya and they changed words around, or they deleted words, reprinted the copies, and the point was to make it written in such a way as if the Alter Rebbe is writing things against Torah. So obviously these were dishonest people, and even though they had their issues with Hasidus, but it was not worth of that. They were just simply dishonest, and they tried to put the Alter Rebbe in this category of someone who goes against Judaism. Once that happened, Alter Rebbe realized that the Tanya must be printed, because in printed form, words can be changed or altered. The 19th and 20th of Kislev in 1798, that's the day that the Alter Rebbe was released from jail. By the way, every Rebbe of Chabad had the opportunity to be in jail. They tell the story about a student who her mother called her up and said, what's going on, whatever. And she said, oh, I'm busy today with celebration. The first Rebbe of Chabad was released from jail. She speaks a little while later, oh, today's another Rebbe of Chabad is released from jail. Finally, she said, who are these rabbis that you're going to? They all end up in jail. They weren't in jail because they committed any crimes. They were in jail because of standing up for Yiddishkeit, the Friedrich Rebbe. By the way, the Tzemach Tzedek, the Rebbe Rashab, and the Rebbe Marash, all three of them were never in jail, but they were all arrested in what's called house arrest. And all for the same reason, because they stood up against the government, fighting Yiddishkeit. House arrest means that they have a guard around the house, and he's not allowed to leave the house, and no one is allowed to come visit them without their permission. There was also an arrest. But this was this is sort of, in a certain way, one of the greatest days in the Pacific history, because it wasn't only that the Alter Rebbe was released from jail, but it meant also spiritually that on that day, in a spiritual level, the permission, the green light was given to spread Hasidus in a way like never before. Our Rebbe was never in jail. Now, the only thing that we celebrate in our generation, which is similar to that, is this day, Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which is different. Now, the Alter Rebbe, after going out of jail, which means the attempt that the people of the opposition made to get him in jail, it failed. 2 years later, they tried again, and the Alter Rebbe was arrested a second time. And this time he went out of jail also in the month of Kislev, but that was during Hanukkah. So that's number 10 and 11. He went out of jail on the 27th of Kislev, which we usually refer to as the third candle. When things happen on Hanukkah, we define the date by the candle. The third candle, the fifth candle, the fourth candle. Even though there are 2 dates there, because apparently there were 2 stages in the Alter Rebbe's release. The first stage was on the 27th, the third day of Hanukkah, and the second stage was finally out of jail was on the 5th day of Hanukkah. So these are all days are related to the development of Hasidus, and you see by Dvachapatz, they all happened in the month of Kislev, and that's why this month earned the name of a Hasidic month, and the month is Geula. And now I want to talk about Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which happened in our generation. And therefore, at least for people like myself, and people who were there at the time that it happened, it's very different than all these days that we mentioned. Of course, all the days we mentioned are things that happened 100 years ago and 50 years ago, even though they're all related to us, it's about Hasidus, but you can't compare it to something that we sort of lived through with the Rebbe himself at the time that it happened. And that was the story of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. First of all, I just want to say as an introduction, sometimes I get the question, I can understand years ago Hasidim was celebrating this day because the Rebbe was sick and his life was in danger, and his life was Baruch Hashem, he was healed, and he was able to continue learning, living for many more years. And during those years, people celebrated. But now, what's the point of celebrating now? But everything we do in Judaism is the same thing. We celebrate going out of Mitzrayim, even though we went back on the Golus later. We celebrate our redemption from Hanukkah, from Purim. We celebrate many things that happened in the past, even though after that, things turned around. And the reason is because maybe what happened physically didn't bring results forever, but what happens spiritually is something which is eternal. And everything that happens physically has its counterpart of what happened then spiritually. That would be Alter Rebbe. It wasn't only that he was locked in jail and he was released from jail because the Russian court decided that he's innocent, but it also is because in the heavenly court they decided and ruled that the time has come that the teachings of Hasidus could be read to the world. And the same here was with Rosh Chodesh Kislev. I just want to say that when this happened to the Rebbe, to all of us, it was really a big shock because the Rebbe physically was very strong. Just talking about physically. Many of the Rebbeim were physically weak. For example, the Mittel Rebbe, he had a heart condition, he had a lung condition. There were many stories where he had fainted, and he actually passed away at a very young age, at the age of 54. Similarly, the Rebbe Marash was sick for a long time. I mean, he did whatever he did as a Rebbe, but he was suffering from certain conditions. He passed away at 48, also a very young age. The Rebbe Rashab, when his father, Rebbe Marash, passed away, he was only 22, 23. But at that point, he got very sick. And he was busy for a few years, just traveling back and forth to different doctors, to the extent that the previous Rebbe said that until the age 9, he almost didn't have a father because he was always traveling. And at the age 9, the Rebbe Rashab, shortly before that, wrote a will because he was so sick, he actually wrote a will. And when the Frierdiker Rebbe was 17 years old, the doctor said that the Rebbe Rashab just has a few months to live. Miraculously, he lived for almost another 20 years after that. But the Frierdiker Rebbe, as we know, went through Russian jails, and that was at the age of 47, tortured, thrown down the steps, and other kind of torture. So at the age of 60, he was already in a wheelchair. If you see the pictures of the previous Rebbe coming to America, at the age of 60, he was in a wheelchair. Our Rebbe was physically very strong, and the kind of schedule that he had was a schedule that I would say even people many years younger couldn't keep up with. The Rebbe had a daily schedule, came to 770 every morning, 10:30, 11 o'clock in the morning, left at night. 3 nights a week he would meet with people, which is called Yechidus. And these meetings lasted till 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, 5 in the morning. I remember when I was in yeshiva during the month of Tishrei, where a lot of guests came, our learning began, our Hasidus session in the morning began at 7:30. When I came at 7:30, the Rebbe was still continuing Yechidus from the night before that started at 8 o'clock. This is the schedule that the Rebbe had. On top of that, he would travel to the Ohel a few times a month, and when he went to the Ohel, he would be fasting. And then the Rebbe had long farbrengens for hours and hours. Many farbrengens after the over, the Rebbe would distribute wine, and that would be standing on his feet for hours. This is before the dollars. So when the Rebbe had the heart attack, it was like a shock, because we knew the Rebbe in such a very healthy way. And how was it? When was it? So this was the middle of Hakafos. The dancing in 770 is set up in a way that the Rebbe is all the way up front, as you see where the Rebbe's place is now. From there, the Rebbe would lead the Hakafos with waving his hand or clapping. And the first Hakafa and the 7th, he himself would go to the middle and dance with the Torah. And the dancing was with his brother-in-law. He would put his hands on the brother-in-law's shoulder. His brother-in-law would put his hands on the Rebbe's shoulder, and they would dance together. But every other Hakafa, the Rebbe would stand up front and lead the Hakafas from there. This was the 4th Hakafa. I remember seeing the Rebbe looking at the crowd, and suddenly, no one should ever see anything like this. The Rebbe's face turned white. It looked like in front of a window and someone draws down a white window shade. That's what it looked like. The stage is not white. You can see the Rebbe turning around, holding on to the stender, sitting down. Immediately, the Rebbe's secretary ran over. There was a doctor or two in the crowd. They ran over. They wanted the Rebbe to drink something. The Rebbe didn't want to drink. It was before Kiddush. We still drink and eat in the sukkah. It was Shmini Atzeres when it happened. And right away they said everybody should leave the shul because there were so many thousands of people. There's no air. So everybody ran out of the shul. And the Rebbe nevertheless insisted that he wants to finish the Hakofis. And he also wants to do the seventh where he goes himself to do the Hakofis. No one was able to determine that the Rebbe had a heart attack at that moment, even though it looked like that. The Rebbe went to seven Hakofis. The Rebbe danced with his brother-in-law. So the brother-in-law, after going around once or twice, pretended that he just out of breath and stopped. And he stopped, so the Rebbe stopped. And then the Rebbe went upstairs. I don't even know anything about heart conditions or heart attacks. You don't walk up a staircase. And the Rebbe walked up the staircase. Then he said he wants to go into the sukkah. They were begging the Rebbe that the doctors come in, examine him. He went into the sukkah. He made Kiddush. And only after that, he went to his room. Then he allowed the doctors to come to examine him. I remember there was one of the people. She was a woman who worked in the Frierdiker Rebbe's apartment. And the Rebbe knew her. She knew the Rebbe from all the years that she worked by the previous Rebbe. She happened to be there working. And she said to the Rebbe, if a chassid would have this, the Rebbe, of course, refused to go to the hospital. And she said, Rebbe, if a chassid would have this condition, wouldn't you tell him to go to the hospital? The Rebbe said, and what would the chassid do? I would tell him, would he listen to me? He said, yeah, of course he would listen to you. So then listen to me now also. I'm not going to the hospital. That was the other's answer. The doctors immediately determined that the Rebbe had, unfortunately, a heart attack. And people who were connected to the cardiologist called their personal cardiologist. Could you do us a personal favor? I know it's 11, 12 o'clock at night. Come over. This is a Rebbe, not an ordinary person. And they came over. Of course, what did they say right away? He must go to the hospital. ICU. And they said, he's not going to the hospital, he's staying here. Somebody got very angry, like, why are you driving me crazy? I can't be responsible for a patient that doesn't go to the hospital. And they left. 5 o'clock in the morning, the Rebbe had a massive heart attack. Massive. No one knew at the time what the situation was. Like I told you, Dr. Weiss said that he never saw such a heart in a living person. So one of the doctors actually told the Rebbe that 75% of the heart is not working anymore, only 25%, and they can't assure him that he'll make it through the night. The Rebbe said, well, 25% is working, so he'll make it through the night. Yeah, not a problem. I'm just going to give over a few of the details that happened at the time. First of all, the doctors wanted everyone to leave 770. And the Rebbe insisted that they stay there. Too much noise. The Rebbe needs rest. The Rebbe said, no, the singing is something which is sweet music to my ears. The Rebbe gave a message that everybody should go home, have their Yom Tov meals, and not hang around. Of course, not everybody left, but the Rebbe wanted the Chassidim to continue on with doing what they needed to do. And we know that in general, the Rebbe's approach with everything is, as you know, l'chatchila Rebbe, to be positive and to think positive and to just go above the situation. And that's how the Rebbe conducted himself throughout this whole entire period. He didn't want anyone sitting there and crying. Everybody should, it's Simchas Torah, you have to dance in Simchas Torah and do what you need to do. Those people used to go to other neighborhoods to help the singing there, should go to the other neighborhoods. Everything should continue as it is. Dr. Weiss, I once heard him speak at a gathering, and he said that most patients having the condition the Rebbe had are not even conscious, and those that are conscious, they're definitely not capable of thinking straight. The Rebbe was giving him ideas, and so some of the ideas of the Rebbe, he was light years ahead of himself. One of them was about stem cells, which I'll soon talk about. And that he said he only found it later in research libraries, but it wasn't anything that was being done yet. What I'm referring to is there was a doctor named Dr. Lown. This story was told by Rabbi Groner. He's a shliach in Israel, and his father was the Rebbe's secretary. And he said that there's a doctor called Dr. Lown. They're one of the biggest cardiologists in America. He's the one who invented the what do they call it? When they give electric shock to the heart to save a person. And he was related to a Lubavitcher family called Pinson. And they asked him that he should come to see the Rebbe, even though he's, like I said, the biggest doctor in America, but he came. And when he went back to the airport, somebody from the office, the Rebbe's office, was the one who was driving him back. And he told them that he had a discussion with the Rebbe. He told the Rebbe, you have to learn to live with a heart that's 75% not working. And the Rebbe says, why can't we get the 75% to work again? So he told the Rebbe that it's not possible. And he explained that a heart is like rubber. And once you sort of stretch it, that's it. It's not what it used to be anymore. You just can't go back to that. And the Rebbe argued, no, the heart is a living organ. And if it's a living organ, you should be able to get it back what it's supposed to be. And he told the person in the car, but unfortunately, the Rebbe doesn't really understand medicine. Guess what? A few years later, it was announced, actually, it was in the Israeli newspapers, he said, there was a doctor there that said that in America, they just came to this thing that they're working on being able to bring back the part of the heart that's no longer working, that it should be able to revive the cells, and it should be able to be healthy again, which is things we're working on now with stem cells. And they'll get there because that's just a matter of time until they'll master that. The custom by the Rebbe was that, by the way, all this time the Rebbe was in his room, they had a minion there, the Rebbe read the Haftorah as he usually does. All these things are not done for people who have heart conditions. The next step was every year on Simchas Torah, when it's over, the Rebbe had a Farbrengen. The Farbrengen was usually about 6 hours, and after that, the Rebbe would give out wine. The Rebbe told the doctors that he wants to speak with the Chassidim from his room, speak on a microphone after Yom Tov is over. And the doctor said that for a heart patient to speak is dangerous, and he'd rather not. And the Rebbe said he'd rather, yes. They had to negotiate. They negotiated, and they finally agreed that they'll give the Rebbe 5 minutes to speak. He's on a monitor. If anything goes wrong, the Rebbe agreed he'll stop speaking. The Rebbe spoke for 20 minutes. And the 20 minutes, what the Rebbe did was interesting. It was like a whole Farbrengen of 6 hours condensed in 20 minutes. What I mean to say, we know the subjects that the Rebbe usually talks about by these Farbrengens. All those subjects were there in miniature, so to speak. A mimer, and then other sikhs and other subjects that he talks about. But what was amazing also the way the Rebbe began. The Rebbe began by saying, he didn't say there was a heart attack. He didn't say because he's not well. He didn't say that, but he did say that he started off right with a positive note about it. Let me see if I can even get this here. Yeah, I could get it. What?
Did you hear it?
I'm going to play it right now.
No, she said, were you there?
I was there, yes, of course. You can imagine the excitement of Chassidim to say the Rebbe is going to be speaking to us. Everyone, the Rebbe had a heart attack. The Rebbe is in the room, and he thought, who knows how long it'll take till we'll be able to hear anything from the Rebbe. So everybody was very excited. Let me see if I can get to the beginning.
Tem critério desafio tem de chama Iker.
מערכת מבשרת תשל"ח.
Redt men noch Abdole, bei der Frank kommen und in der Gesine Drochen auf Tibet werden das was in der Weg. Als ich meine kleine Rechetin begann.
This is how the Rebbe started. Because of a reason, we're speaking now after Havdalah. Every time the Farbrengen would last for 6 hours, how would it be? The Rebbe would wash before the Yom Tov was over. And now the Yom Tov continued for 6 hours, they would have the Farbrengen. But because the Rebbe had to speak on the microphone, it has to be after Havdalah, after the Yontif is over. The Rebbe started saying, because of the reason, I'm speaking now after Havdalah, and that enables everybody in the whole world to be participating, and we can reach everyone, and everyone could be listening, people that are far, geographically far, people that are spiritually far, everybody could be part of it, and then everyone on, again, started off by saying the advantage is speaking under these circumstances, which is everything the Rebbe teaches us. We saw the Rebbe sort of living through it himself. And another thing that happened was, by the way, this is before that. How was the Farbrengen? The Rebbe said to set up the Farbrengen, his chair should be standing there, and everybody should be there just as if the Rebbe would be sitting there. So they set up the Farbrengen as usual. The Rebbe's chair was there. And then the Rebbe asked the doctors, when they take the syringe and they draw blood, what causes the blood to come out? So the doctor said, the vacuum causes the blood to come out. The Rebbe said to give the message over to the Chassidim. And when there's a vacuum, as a result of that, there's going to be more life coming out. In other words, the blood represents life. The vacuum means there's an absence, but as a result of the absence, will actually be something bigger and greater coming. So even though the Rebbe said the chair is empty, and as if we don't see the Rebbe's presence there, but out of this, only good will come out and even better will come out. And the truth is, if I get a time to explain it, after this heart attack, not only the Rebbe recovered, the Rebbe started to do things that he never did before when he was younger in the earlier years, which on the surface also seem to be almost impossible. Anyway, the Rebbe spoke for the 20 minutes, and the next thing that happened was the Rebbe asked for his letters. He wants to answer the letters. And the doctor said to the Rebbe, you have to understand that you really need to relax. It's 75% of 75% of your heart is not working. And give the letters now, do all that, that's stress, and you have to relax. The Rebbe didn't answer. He says, Rebbe, did you hear what I said? Yes, I heard you said that 25% of my heart is working. That's what I heard. Of course, again, the Rebbe negotiated and they gave the Rebbe the letters. I think the Rebbe explained to them, if they don't give them the letters now, we'll have much more work later. So we better give it to them now. And this is after 2 days Yontif, some more letters accumulated. The Rebbe started right away answering people's letters during that time. And that was what became the next thing, that for every Shabbos, after Shabbos was over, everyone gathered in 770, and the Rebbe spoke from his room on the microphone, gave over for Brendan, as it was during the week. The first time when the Rebbe came downstairs again was Yutzes Kislev, actually. But the first time I should really start with Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So after all this, I forgot to say, the main thing is, being that the doctors disappeared, so someone called Dr. Weiss, his name is Ira Weiss, is a doctor in Chicago. He had a connection to Chabad. Would you come and care for the Rebbe? We need a doctor. The Rebbe doesn't want to go to a hospital. So he said, I'm ready to come on one condition, that all the equipment that's in an ICU unit in a hospital should be in 770, then I'm ready to come. You got it. And within 24 hours, they got all the equipment that's in an ICU hospital, had connections to a certain doctor, Dr. Richter, and through him, they got equipment from the hospital brought to 770, and the upstairs of 770 became the hospital ward. And nobody was upstairs, everybody was downstairs. And they had doctors who cared for the Rebbe around the clock. There were a few doctors they shared at the time. There was a Dr. Resnick, who was also involved. And he also was actually working for the United States Army, and they had to get special permission for him to leave and come and care for the Rebbe. But the first time the Rebbe came downstairs to Farbrengen was Yutzes Kislev, and the Rebbe had a monitor on him, and they monitored from upstairs. If anything was wrong, the Rebbe agreed, he will stop, but they allowed that. And then came Hanukkah. Hanukkah was the first time the Rebbe went to the Ohel. We know the Rebbe, you go to the Ohel every month, at least twice a month, if not more. And initially he said it's not possible, but the Rebbe eventually Hanukkah went to the Ohel, and he also gave out Hanukkah gel. In those days, the Rebbe didn't give out dollars like he gives out that he gave out on the Sundays. So this was something only Hanukkah money, and there was a line. How long do you think the line lasted? 5 minutes. Nobody wanted to walk over, and because of me, the Rebbe should stand longer. Not only that, the Rebbe noted that some people stopped others from going over. So the Rebbe said that nobody should interfere. Everyone was very upset. Whoever wants to go over should go over. And then another thing happened at the end of Hanukkah. There's a halacha that if a person's life was in danger and your life was saved, then you make a feast of Thanksgiving called the Suda Zaydah. The Rebbe never used the name, but on the last day of Hanukkah, the 8th day of Hanukkah, everybody people were davening with the Rebbe, the Mincha, and after Mincha, they announced that right now there'll be a Farbrengen downstairs. Everybody was in shock. Not only the Farbrengen, but there was also challah on the table. Everybody should wash. That never happens by Farbrengen, only if it's yontif. Then we realized that this is the Rebbe's Thanksgiving meal for the miracle. And Rabbi J.J. Hecht, he's the one, you see his picture downstairs, he's the one that initially was the one who was in charge of the school, and he was the person that the Rebbe always translated the Rebbe's Farbrengen. You see it on the videos, especially when he spoke to children. So the Rebbe called him in and said, I want you to keep this a secret that I'm going to tell you now. I want you to order challah in the bakery and prepare X amount of challah and for tomorrow. Basically, the Rebbe's secretaries had no idea. The Rebbe's doctors had no idea. I guess they say the Rebbe didn't want anybody to give him a hard time. So he did it to this person. He prepared everything. I remember he as the Rebbe, I have a son who was studying in Morristown. Can I tell my son? And the Rebbe says, if you tell a bacher, that's publicizing it to Australia. So I happened to be in 770 at the time. There was someone I used to study Chassidus with him. He lived in upstate New York. And he said, I'm coming in to maybe study some Chassidus. I'll be in Brooklyn. That was in 770. The place was empty, literally empty. And all of a sudden the doors flung open and everybody was running. And that's how I found out that they were the Farbrengen. So the night of Rosh Chodesh Kislev, which was a Thursday night that year, like this year was a Friday, that actually the Rebbe walked out of 770 earlier a little bit. Where did he go? He went next door to 770, the Rebbe's library. And something major happened during this time, and that is that it's a long story, and this we'll talk about when we talk about the Rebbe's library, but there was a very big portion of the Friedrich Rebbe's library that was lost during World War II, because the Friedrich Rebbe had it in Poland, and in order to protect it, it was put into it was given into one of the government buildings where they kept it, stored it. But after the war, they said it's gone. It was destroyed during the war, and they don't exist anymore. And there was somebody who was doing some research, and he found that all the books are totally intact in Poland. So then America got involved. The State Department negotiated with Poland, and they agreed to give all the Sforim back to the Rebbe. And that happened during this time when the Rebbe was in 770, and all the books were brought next door. So the Rebbe went next door. That was his first time that he walked outside to the library to look at all the Sforim that came. Just to give you an idea of how precious this was to the Rebbe, how meaningful this was to the Rebbe, there's a letter where he wrote the lawyer who was involved. His name was Mr. Schuster. He was the one who dealt with the State Department and got the books. The Rebbe wrote a letter to thank him. The Rebbe starts with the letter by saying, I'm sorry that I didn't send this letter earlier. My emotions were so strong that I could not put this into words. And that's why it took so long. Eventually, I realized I'm not going to get to put it into words. I might as well just send the letter as is now. In other words, the Rebbe saying that he was so emotional in a positive way about getting these books that he was sort of held captive all these years. And by the way, the Frierdiker Rebbe tried many times to get this for him back, because it's books from his father, his grandfather, great grandfather, up until the Alter Rebbe, and they always said it was destroyed, it doesn't exist. So this is something very precious to the Rebbe. And then the next time was the night of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. The doctor said, now the Rebbe can go home. And I guess when a person's not well, one of the days that you can say marks like a turning point in the person's recovery is when they're discharged from the hospital. The Rebbe wasn't in the hospital. So the day that marks the change is the day that he went home from 770 and with the doctor's approval. So that's the day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. When the Rebbe went home, all the people sitting were outside. That night, it was singing and farbrengen all night long. The Rebbetzin said she never saw such a rejoicing amongst the Chassidim since the day that her father was released from jail in Yom Tammuz. One of the things that were so powerful during this time when the Rebbe was not well was there was the outpour of love from the Chassidim to the Rebbe and from the Rebbe to the Chassidim. The Rebbe's biggest concern at the time is that the Chassidim should not be worried. He told the doctors that the condition he's even allowing them to talk to him is that whatever is going on does not leak outside and stay all inside. And therefore the Rebbe was constantly encouraging, answering letters, like I told you, doing things which are very difficult because of his condition, but he did it so Chassidim should feel that the Rebbe is there for us and he's continuing with everything. On the other hand, the Chassidim, everything they did then was for the Rebbe's, healing and the Rebbe's fullness. Slowly, the Rebbe went back to what he did before. And not only went back, but for example, the dollars. The dollars began in 1984, which is a few years after this. So this is something to stand on your feet for hours and hours, distributing dollars to people. And I remember once there was a farbrengen, this was 1982, the Rebbe turned 80. That farbrengen lasted till 3 in.the.morning. And then 3 in.the.morning, the Rebbe began to distribute tanyas to everybody. And that ended 6 in.the.morning. Remember, we woke up all our children, they all came there, some with pajamas, some were dressed, and everybody got I remember once someone who I was studying with, whose parents weren't religious, definitely weren't Chabad, and they were so angry, off the wall, who wakes up children in the middle of the night? So I said to tell his parents, what if somebody would say, whoever comes to me 3 o'clock in the morning, this night with your children, everyone who comes will get $500,000. Do you think you'd wake up your children? Guarantee you. And even if they said no, I'll tell you the answer is yes. So if you don't value it, you don't understand why wake up the children. But if you value it, the Rebbe gave everyone a tanya. During that farbrengen, Dr. Weiss was there. And he's standing there looking at the Rebbe. The Rebbe a few times told him like this, I think he told the doctor to check his pulse because he was getting nervous. But this was after his massive heart attack. And the Rebbe continued with everything. So these are the two things which really stand out. Number one, the Rebbe's way of L'chatchila Rebbe, exactly the way he tells us to live. Don't pay attention. Don't give any substance to all the negative. Don't give any substance to any of the fears about the future. And the second thing is that what we saw was this outpour of love between the Rebbe and the Chassidim. A Rebbe and a Chassid is a relationship that is threefold. Number one, the Rebbe is a teacher, and we are students. He teaches us Chassidus, Torah. Second of all, the Rebbe is like a king, and we are like his subjects. He gives us hiras, he tells us things to do, to certain customs, to do mitzvahim. That these are the things that give the Rebbe pleasure, and we accept it with pleasure that the Rebbe tells us things that we need to do. Not only we accept it with pleasure, for a chassid, it's exciting that I have something new that I can connect to the Rebbe to. Mitzvah Tefillin, Mitzvah Mezuzah, Mitzvah Chanukah, Mitzvah Pesach, all these mitzvahs were new paths through which we can connect to the Rebbe. And the third thing is the Rebbe and Chassidim is like a father and a child, which means that the love between a Rebbe and a Chassid is, as it says in the Sikh, is the greatest love that exists. The previous Rebbe once said that Shlomo Melech, King Solomon, wrote a book, which is one of the books of Torah called Shir HaShirim. And he describes the love between Hashem and the Jewish people like husband and wife, like Chassid and Kala. So he said that was before the days of Rebbe Chassid. If it would have been later, instead of describing the love between a Chassid and Kala, he would use the metaphor of a Chassid and his Rebbe. The love of a Rebbe to a Chassid and a Chassid to a Rebbe is something which is beyond. And that's one of the things that we saw then, the outpour of love between everyone. And we know with the Alter Rebbe, if I have a little bit few minutes, the Alter Rebbe, after he was arrested, it says in all the Sikhs, what I mentioned before, that it wasn't just arrested because they were other Jews who didn't understand, and they thought that this is a movement which is against Judaism, so they had him arrested. The Russian government thought that he's planning a revolution, so they had him arrested. The real reason was that in heavenly court, it was opposition to the Alter Rebbe. That there was an opposition, and there was they were prosecuting the Alter Rebbe that he's revealing the deep secrets of Torah that was never revealed before, and it's inappropriate. So the fact that the Alter Rebbe was released from jail, which means that the Russian government said that he's innocent and he can go on, continue doing what he's doing, was an indication that the same thing happened up there in the heavenly court. That the heavenly court ruled that the Alter Rebbe is right, and we could now continue with Chassidus. So after the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, he didn't just continue. He began to teach Chassidus and reveal Chassidus on a level, in a way that was never known before. Just to give an example, before the Alter Rebbe was arrested, if he said a mimer, it could have been 5, 6, 7 lines. You know that there's a custom amongst the men, the Bochum, that they say a mimer by heart on a birthday or something on a Shabbos. So I remember once when we were in yeshiva, took turns. Every Shabbos, someone else had to do mimer by heart. Not easy. A mimer could be 5, 6 pages, and you have to work on it to know it by heart. But a friend of mine, it was his week to do it. He gets up and sits down, and he says a mimer, and within 2 minutes he's finished. And the mashpia looks at him and says, "What's that?" And I took a mimer for the Alter Rebbe, one of those before he was arrested. It's a short mimer, 5 lines, so it didn't take him too long. That's the easy pass. But those Maimorim were 5, 10 lines. After the Alter Rebbe went out of jail, the Maimorim were pages and pages and pages, which means that the going out of jail meant that after that, Chassidus took on a whole new level of reaching the world. And the same with every Rebbe. Even the Frierdiker Rebbe, the Rebbe speaks about the fact that he went out of jail. It wasn't just that now he can go back to doing what he did before. And he points out that what changed after the Frierdiker Rebbe went out of jail was that he began to spread Hasidus and Yiddishkeit globally. Up until then, it was all in Europe, a little bit in America, a little bit in Israel. After that, he began to send shluchim to every part of the world. Of course, in the Frierdiker Rebbe's generation, up until 1950, it was still very limited. Now, you probably know that it isn't the place on the planet, I think, that doesn't have a Chabad Shliach in the most remote, ridiculous places. As they say that there are no Jews on the moon, and the proof is because there's no Chabad house there. So this change and this shift that began global began after he went out of jail. So when we look at the Rebbe, we also ask our question, what changed after that? And the answer is that the Rebbe's talk and the Rebbe's letting us know that we've come so close and we're at the threshold of Mashiach coming. Every year it became, I would say, progressively more and more intense and stronger, but it began mainly after this incident that happened with Rosh Chodesh Kislev. So this is the Yontif. The song that people sing is a song that a chassid composed. A young man on his own composed a song, a very catchy song. And this became the symbol of Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And because the Shluchim always make their convention at that time of the year, this became sort of the symbol of the Shluchim convention, the Rosh Chodesh Kislev. And for Hasidim, it just means that after all this, we say to ourselves, we should therefore appreciate more everything the Rebbe gave us, is giving us, his brachas, and the learning to take advantage of all the sikh that the Rebbe gave us. Rebbe, at this point, we have 40 volumes of the Rebbe's sikhs, and we have close to 40 volumes of the Rebbe's letters, and there are 6 volumes of the Rebbe's Maimorim, and then there are dozens of volumes of unedited sikhs and Maimorim. There's so much that we could be learning. And all these things are things that give us strength and guidance. And we should walk away from this day with a stronger connection to the Rebbe, stronger connection to studying Chassidus, and a stronger connection to do everything we can to bring Mashiach and end this interesting goals.
I was thinking while you're talking about I was one time in a random place traveling and I met this man who was doctor and he's like from Town, like a firm man, but he said he was an intern during the time. It wasn't this time because the Rebbe was actually in the hospital, so I don't know what that was. But
that was the second time. Yes.
Okay.
I know.
So he said that a nurse, like they were trying to find a man to take care of his blood. And he was an intern and literally got found a job, but they called him in. He's like, he was Jewish in the front, so they like come do it, so a woman want to do it. And when he went, he said something similar. He was telling the story, because on the level because it's very excited. But he said that he never saw someone so sick and so alive at the same time. He's never seen someone so alive at the exact same time. I was like, it's similar.
But this was when the Rebbe had his stroke. This was a year later. Yeah.
And he said it was really scary to keep up from the Rebbe. He felt like he was doing something wrong.
Yeah, when the Rebbe had that second time, there was a therapist that came to do physical therapy with the Rebbe after the stroke. He was an Israeli, very assimilated Jew. I'll give you an example. His wife would always come with him, but she sat in the car. She didn't go into 770. And Mama just begged her, "What do you have to do in the car? Well, come in. We'll give you a place to sit down, or coffee, this and that." She wouldn't go. Later, she said the reason why she didn't go is because when she was younger, she's Israeli. She was walking through the streets of Yerushalayim, and apparently she wasn't dressed Thursday, and people threw rocks at her. And since then, she stays away from these religious Haredim as far as she can. She's petrified to walk in. So they assured her that no one's going to throw anything at her. So I'm just showing you how far they were. After he treated the Rebbe, later he spoke. He got closer to Yiddishkeit. And the Rebbe wasn't speaking. He says when he treated the Rebbe, he felt that his eyes were penetrating him, and the Rebbe saw through him everything that's going on in his life. That was his feeling, and it caused him to turn around and get close to Yiddishkeit. Okay. A good Shabbos, everybody. And if
Shabbos.
Thank
you.
And that's the Hachayim of time today.
Thank you.
And there's best set. So you have a few minutes, give yourself 5 minutes. Am I right? Yeah.